wasn't really a seller's market. It really wasn't a buyer's market. I feel like we were just frozen. Real estate is a long game. A good house will still move if it's priced correctly. Like if you buy it and you try to sell it a year or two later, the odds are in most cases, unless you bought really, really well or added a lot of value, you're going to end up underwater.
I still see a few multiple offer situations. If the home is in great shape and it's priced right, it's still lying off the shelf. But obviously, depending on credit scores and things like that, that is a challenge, right? In affordability. Obviously, neither one of us are lenders or economists. We do listen to quite a few different podcasts and try to keep current with that. All right. Welcome to another episode of the Agent to Investor podcast, where we talk about the agent side of real estate investing. We'll be talking about the successes, the lessons, and all in between. My name is Nico Garcia, local real estate agent and investor based out of Montgomery County, Maryland. And as always, I'm joined by my co-host,
Anna, Northern Virginia realtor and mostly out-of-state investor.
And you got just us two today. I want to give a quick shout out to all of our awesome guests that we've had over the last 2 years. Anna, we're coming up on 2 years of doing our show. So I guess congratulations to us, right?
Yeah, round of applause.
Round of applause. And, this is the first episode, the first recording of the new year. So we wanted to make an episode kind of like a reflection and projection of what we're seeing in the housing market, what we saw this past year, a few headlines that Anna and I have been texting about, and we wanted to just make a recording and talk about it. So first of all, Anna, Happy New Year. I guess, that's first of all, and tell me about how your year was last year and what you saw. And the first question everyone always asks us, right? We're both real estate agents, and everybody's always like, how's the housing market, right? And how's the housing market? And that's such a loaded question, right?
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask that loaded question to you, right? What did you see in your market and I think happened in 2025?
Yeah. It's funny because I've learned to turn it around. So when someone asks me that, I'm like, well, what have you heard about the housing market? And then I let them go first.
Such a salesperson. Answer questions and more questions.
Yes. And then listen, that's key. So, at least around here in the Northern Virginia market, which is the one that I know best as far from an agent perspective, I know a lot of agents struggles. There was more houses that came on the market towards the end of the year. Like the rest of the year was kind of like this weird dance. Like it wasn't really a seller's market. It really wasn't a buyer's market. I feel like we were just frozen. Like sales were still happening. But there were a lot of agents that I've talked to locally were like, it was a rough year, really slow. Production was down. People just weren't selling. Buyers weren't sure if they should buy or wait for interest rates. And then the second half of the year, we had the government shutdown, which a lot of people definitely pump the brakes because they're like, am I even going to have a job? So I think it's been I guess it was since January is when a lot of this started in January of last year. So it's been very chaotic. All of the change, all of the uncertainty have frozen at least our market a little bit. And then now towards the end of the year, we were getting more inventory. I can't say it's in prior years before COVID where we're still not quite at those levels, but it's definitely increased since what's been going on the last 5 years. And so it's kind of shifting, in my opinion, in our side to a little bit more of a balanced market. It's not really a buyer's market, not completely a seller's market because there's more inventory still sitting. Buyers are actually able to get inspections and contingencies and ask for seller credits. I'm seeing that there's, of course, always those pockets of super desirable neighborhoods that if a house comes on, those probably go a lot faster and maybe have a little bit more competition. But as an agent, I feel like it was slow. And then now it's kind of picking up with listings and buyers are starting to see a little bit more opportunity. So I'm excited. I think 2026, I feel like there are a lot of hesitation in 25, and I feel like 26 people are fresh start. The gates are going to open. The 1st of January, I started getting calls from buyers that have been sitting on the fence.
It's funny how that works, right?
Yeah, I know. I'm like, oh, it's a new year, new house.
We'll take it. But Anna, I agree. I'm seeing some similar here on the Maryland side, and I think it is becoming more of a balanced market, right? You and I started at such a crazy time to start, right? With interest rates really low, and it really was unrealistic for that market to be that for the next 10, 15, 20 years, because if it is, that's an unhealthy housing market. And so what we're seeing now, homes could be sitting a little bit longer. Like you say, a lot of hesitancy on both the buyers and the sellers, really. And so our job as real estate professionals is keep an eye on the market, obviously, but also try and set the expectations right with our clients, because real estate it is a roller coaster, right? You have to follow the market. So that I agree with you 100%.
Yeah, and I think sellers are finally starting to realize that it has shifted, because I think that's why we've had an increase in pricing reductions, but I think that's because a lot of sellers were still thinking one way and the market was speaking a different way, and they're now realizing, like, I mean, a good house will still move if it's priced correctly. I feel like that's like the law of real estate, but in this case, it's showing a lot more where houses are just they were priced thinking it was still a seller's market, and then they just until they have to correct it.
Can you think of any examples of how your expertise as being an investor and owning properties yourself has helped you this past in 2025 of, like, I don't know, help guiding clients or helping you as an investor?
Yeah, I think, I mean, as an investor, I will say 2024, we didn't pick up any more properties. If anyone's watched historic, like the past episodes, if you haven't, you should go back, because I've been dealing with stabilizing the properties and all that comes with managing your own property. But from being an investor on the agent side, I absolutely think it has helped me. I feel like there's like, I'll say there's probably two paths. Like, there's the people that are like, "Ooh, I'm interested in learning about investing. Like, is there opportunity now?" And I said, "Yeah, like chaos always breeds opportunity if you know where to look." But I've also been able to talk to home sellers, which I may have said before in a previous episode. And Brian, my husband, is like, "Stop topping yourself out of listings." And I'm like, some of these listings don't make sense. Like, a lot of people maybe want to sell or has to sell for whatever reason, and then I kind of walk through it, the situation, the scenario with the clients. I had one that she bought somewhere else. She was like, "I'm retired. I want to move up north." And she was thinking about selling her house. A little bit of a hoarder situation going on. I walked her through what we could do to help. She's very emotionally attached to the house, and it's completely paid off. And I kind of asked her, I was like, you know, would you consider it as a rental? I mean, if you don't want a rental, would you consider seller finance? Because then I would love to know if that's the case. But she was like, hmm. And so she doesn't have to move. She's not on like a specific timeline. So she's slowly started to empty out the house. I've given her some resources. And now she's like, I'm going to rent it and see what happens. And I told her I would be happy to help her and share some of my tools. So maybe in the future it'll turn into something. Maybe it'll be a property we'll be able to pick up. Maybe it'll become a listing. I don't know. And then I have another client that this is newer. This has just happened as of 2 weeks ago. She has a condo she bought 2 years ago. And real estate is a long game. Like, if you buy it and you try to sell it a year or two later, the odds are in most cases, unless you bought really, really well or added a lot of value, you're going to end up underwater. You're going to end up having to pay something to get out of the property. And this particular client, we've had that discussion, and I showed them what the rental rates are in the market. And the rental rates aren't going to quite cover her mortgage. The current rental rates aren't going to quite cover her mortgage, but instead of coming $2,800 out of pocket, she may end up coming out only $600 out of pocket. And that's more manageable for her. She can still keep growing equity in this asset and then potentially sell at a later time where it would work better for her. So yes, it's examples like that I think my investor mindset has helped. There's others, but those are the two that just popped into my mind. Like, what about you? I know you've had some like big ones.
No, but like you said, given options, right? Like, the fix and flippers are really being effective with not only like the cost of labor and materials and things like that, but on the resale, if you're looking at comps from 6 months ago and that was the summer and you're going on the market in December and all those things factored in and the homes are not selling what they were. So like you said, your goal as a real estate agent, as a real estate professional, is to get them from A to B, whether they want to sell it, whether they want to rent it, and give them a logical options, right? And I think that's a benefit of working with an investor friendly agent is they look at it from a different lens. Instead of having the blinders on, they're looking at it from a few different avenues to get them to their end goal. You mentioned seller financing, or even subject to. A lot of agents have no idea what that is and would shy away from it. But if it made sense and it got your seller from A to B, then essentially you're doing your job, and hopefully you make your value proposition that way so that you get paid whichever way they want to go with your commission. So that is very important on our end. I think I mentioned this earlier, like, kind of set the expectations up with letting them know. I think pricing the home quartering is very important now, more than ever, like the first time. So maybe even pricing it a little bit below market so you can, I still see a few multiple offer situations. If the home is in great shape and it's priced right, it's still flying off the shelf. People still love living in the DMV here in our area. We're close to the DC metro area. So I think the transaction number is actually going to go up because people are
Yeah.
going to be tired of being on the sidelines. So what we wanted to talk about is projections, right? We're beginning of the year. This is when everybody's doing the New Year's resolutions and looking throughout the year. And these years go by quick, but we wanted to talk about some of the headlines and what we're seeing. And obviously one of the main things, this might've been episode 5, when we first started doing this, or one of the first 5, is affordability. It's a challenge that people looking to buy homes, looking to buy their first home, especially first time home buyers. And there's a few different reasons why affordability is a challenge. But the first one we want to talk about is interest rates, right? When people ask us, hey, how's the housing market? What's the interest rate? That's usually like their follow-up question. And right now of this recording, they're hovering around 6.5 on your average 30-year fixed, but obviously depending on credit scores and things like that. But that is a challenge, right? In affordability. Obviously, neither one of us are lenders or economists. We do listen to quite a few different podcasts and try to keep current with that. Do you have anything that you would say in terms of where you could see the
Things
mortgage
going.
rates? Yeah, where that is going?
Yes. Well, I will say we don't have crystal balls either. So these are strictly opinions. I feel like I need to make that disclaimer. These are strictly opinions and do what you will with them, but it's not our fault if you do something bad with them. So I don't know. It's interesting. I do feel the same way. I feel like things are shaking loose a little bit. I don't think interest rate. Well, let me rephrase that. I don't know. I think we're not making this political. We've already had this discussion, and some of the topics we're going to talk about will like caveat that up front. But I feel like there's so many like things being pulled out that we'll talk about. Some of these headlines, spaghetti being thrown at the wall, and so the interest rates are getting these weird like blips because like these headlines are coming out, and the interest rates are reacting. Sometimes they're not reacting at all. I think they're going to stay in the 5s, potentially 6s. I think one of my lender buddies said the other day, like some of the BA loans were in like the 5 and had a 5 in front of them. So I think we're probably going to stay in that area. And much to the chagrin of investors, because I wish interest rates would go down so I could refinance and make more money on the
Right.
properties I already own. But I think interest rates need to stay where they are right now because there's such a pent up demand. There's not enough housing. That's still a real thing, the lack of housing. And all of these artificial things or all of these like spaghetti at the wall tactics that are like being thrown to try to force interest rates to come down, we're going to end up right where we were like in 2021 and 2020. Like it's going to be like people are going to be like, oh my God, interest rates are 3% or 4% or whatever. And if we get to that point, affordability is going to last for like 30 seconds. If you're like ready to go and ready to pull the trigger, like maybe you'll catch that like little blip in the radar where you get a house for a good price. But then it's going to do the same thing it did. Like people are going to come out of the woodworks and start feeling like now's the time to buy houses and start bidding it up. And then affordability goes out the window. Like interest rates are not the only thing that makes affordability a thing. Like it's not the only thing that makes a home affordable. It's not just the interest rate.
Mhm.
And that's what people can't focus on.
People get, especially buyers, they get so fixated on mortgage rates. But
Yep.
we're going to talk about a few different factors, right? We talked about mortgage rates. We talked about not enough homes being built. I don't.
Yes.
Do
Well,
you know
wait. What about you? What about you? What do you think is going to happen in 26? What's your crystal ball?
crystal ball? I don't. Again, we are not lenders, but I would say I agree. I think it needs to stay the same because if it were to go down another percentage into the 5s, like you're saying, or low 5s, that's just going to breed a whole other problem, right? A lot of buyers are going to come out of the woodworks, and then just the
Prices are
prices
going
are
to
going
go
to
up.
go up. Essentially, you're still in that same affordability problem, right? So I think as long as it makes sense and you're buying a home that you can afford
Yeah.
at a 6.5, I bought a home at the end of 2024 at a 7%.
Yeah.
So as long as it's affordable, and I think that's one thing that when I'm coaching my first time home buyers is trying to be open to maybe house hacking like Jessica and I are doing, or things that you could do, maybe a value add, finding a home that needs a lot of work, buying it at a discount and fixing it up and building equity that way. there's a lot of different ways that you can help with the affordability challenge, but mortgage rate is just one that I've noticed a lot of buyers fixate on that. And one of the main reasons why is because when people my age, the millennials, were in their first time home buying experience, what they knew was that unicorn years of 2.5%, 3%.
2.5%. Yeah.
Right. And then now that they're like, okay, I'm ready to buy now in 2025, 2026, they're like 6.5. Like, that's crazy. And if you look obviously at the last 50 years, you realize that's not so crazy. What's really it was the historic years of the
Yeah.
pandemic and interest rates that were artificially low.
Yeah. I think when I bought my house, honestly, I think my interest rate was like 11%. And I was like, woohoo, and that's
You're
great.
like, where do
And
I sign?
where I know, right? Yeah, I'm not a house. But I mean, I will say from the investor side, if you talk to most seasoned investors and for anyone out there that is just getting into investing and kind of is waiting for the interest rates to go down too, a good investor buys when no one else is buying. And a good investor will sell when everyone else is buying because the prices are going to go up and they're going to be like, sure, I'll sell this property now because I'm just making hundreds of thousands of dollars in equity because 50,000 buyers over here are like feeding frenzy because the interest rates went down 0.5%. So there's a logic to it. Like seasoned investors will buy when the interest rates are higher and no one else is doing it because you can get a deal. Buyers can get their like contingencies. If the interest rates go down and the buyers all come out, your negotiating power as a buyer basically goes away. So maybe you get the little, yep, you get a better rate, but then you end up with a house with like foundation issues and all kinds of other stuff that you can't protect yourself from because you're trying to be competitive. That's what happened to so many people. I think like a report came out after that big frenzy in 21 and 22. And I think it was the NAR that did it. And there was like a really high percentage, like 50% of people that bought a house during that time had regrets about doing it because they had to waive everything and then walked into a property that had significant issues that they were not planning to pay for or need to deal with. So
Yeah. And because they waived the inspection, they bought it as is. That's something that they have to deal with as buyers. So that's one of those things. And we're going to be talking about a lot of factors, right? We talked about housing shortage. We talked about mortgage rates. And then another thing is the lock-in effect. And we talked about this on a few different episodes, but it does affect affordability. For those that don't know what the lock-in effect is, Anna, do you mind explaining it, how that works and how it's affected affordability?
yes, I'm a victim of the lock-in effect. Actually, I'm not a victim. I am a benefactor. So essentially, a lot of people that own homes during this time when rates were 2.5%, 3%, they refinance into these really low interest rates because like me, I had a higher interest rate on my mortgage. And when I was able to refinance my property, I actually could afford two mortgages. Like when I refinanced my primary home down to the lower, like 2.5%, we were actually able to buy a second home because the interest rates were so low that one mortgage payment now was enough to pay for two. Like it was maybe like a $200 difference. So the lock-in effect is people basically are not moving because they don't want to give up the 2.5% interest rate. Their monthly payments are so low. The interest rate is so low. It's basically free money. And they don't want to move into a 5, 6, 7, 8% interest rate at this point.
Yeah, so people that were selling back then, before the pandemic, before all this, are not selling. They're holding it on. They're talking to Ann and I, and they're like, okay, maybe we just rent it out instead of selling it. So that is causing a housing shortage, obviously, and buyers are being affected by it. And so those are just a few factors that are coming in. So we're talking about affordability. It's been a problem for the last 5 years since we both started in real estate, but we wanted to talk about some headlines of what we're seeing and what the president is thinking of doing to try and solve this affordability challenge. And one headline that I want to talk about is a 50-year mortgage. And those of you may have heard that in the headlines, maybe on social media. President Trump brought that out to try and, it's not a thing here in the United States yet, but he floated the idea out. And basically, the idea is to essentially extend it to 50 years, lower the monthly payment to make it more affordable for the average buyer. And I'm looking at Anna's face, and Anna it sounds like she has her own opinion about this, but that was the general idea of what it was going to be. Obviously, not a foolproof plan of what's going to be happening. Obviously, the mortgage rate on a 50-year would be probably higher than on a 30-year. It also makes your home ownership longer, essentially, if you plan on buying a home for 50 years. That's people already have a problem with 30 years mortgages. But that is essentially in a nutshell. Anna, would love to know your opinions on this one.
You sure you don't want to go first on this one? I think it's a terrible idea. I mean, if somebody wants to get a 50-year mortgage, good on them. But like all the reasons why I wouldn't get a 50-year mortgage. So recent statistics came out, like the first-time home buyer average age for a first-time home buyer is now 40. So if you buy your house at 40, you're going to be 90 when you pay off that house. I mean, maybe you'll make extra payments and get done a little sooner. So there's that. The biggest thing, though, for me is the amount of for the first 20 years on average of that mortgage, you're basically renting from the bank. And that's why a lot of people, investors included, buy homes is to build that equity and build that wealth. And because usually the way mortgage loans are set up, it's very heavy interest in the beginning. And then you buy more and more, you buy down more of the principal as you get further into the loan. So I was reading an article, statistically, they did the math. I don't know what it is. I'll have to find the article. But the first 20 years of the loan, you're mostly paying interest. So if you go to sell in 20 years, which is not unheard of if you're 40 and then you're 60 when you go to sell, you will have little to no equity in that house. So you may be underwater when you go and sell. So, and that was kind of my big thing. And then talking about affordability, I've also seen the math done. And honestly, it saves you maybe $300 a month. We're not talking about thousands of dollars being saved in monthly mortgage payments. We're talking about a couple $100 that maybe you will save, but you're tacking on 20 years to your loan. When you have a kid, you don't even have to legally be obligated to them that long. Once they're 18, you're like, I'm out.
No, but you bring up the most important part, right? Is, you're stretching it out even longer, right? For first-time home buyers, whenever they look at their first mortgage, they're like, I'm paying how much in interest and how much is going towards principal? And essentially, if you're doing that with a 50-year mortgage, it makes that amplified, right? You're making the period longer, but you're going to be paying more in interest. And I remember talking about this with somebody, and that's just the way these banks make their money, right? They understand that not everybody's going to stay in their home for 30 years, for 50 years, and they front load all the interest in that amortization schedule. And that's how they get paid. So like Anna said, it might lower your monthly payment by $200, $300, but at the long run, it's not really solving the housing crisis that we have here in the United States.
Yeah, and you will pay significantly more for that house, like a $500,000 house when you're said and done. And I'm making up numbers based on what I remember. So if I'm wrong, feel free to correct me. But when you're done paying in 50 years, you would have paid $1.5 million for a $500,000 for a $500,000 house because you just dragged it on for so long. So I don't know. I don't see it happening. I know the banks front load the interest as well, but I also don't know that banks want to carry 50-year mortgages, that money that they have to tie up for 50 years.
So we'll keep an eye on that and obviously update the audience if anything that comes out of that or if we hear any new news about that. But I know you had an interesting headline that you wanted to share with us as well.
I have a couple. So these are a little bit newer. So the one that came out recently this past week was, and I'm reading it so I don't get it wrong, Trump wants to ban large investors from purchasing single family homes. And when he means large investors, he means institutional REITs, which are real estate investment trusts. It's usually people invest a bunch of money in different companies. It's a big company and they buy lots of properties. And so he is basically saying he wants Congress to pass laws to ban them from buying single family houses. And this is another one of those spaghetti at the wall moments. I'm just going to say stuff that sounds good. But when you actually dig into the logic behind and how economics works, is it really feasible? And so this article went on to say things, essentially the percentage of investors that buy over the course of in the past year or so, it's 17% of all home sales. And then of that 17%, the majority of those are actually smaller investors that own 10 properties, or us, us type of investors. And the institutional investors make up a significantly smaller portion.
I think it was 10% of that little pie is by those big companies.
Yes. So I'm kind of okay. So the economists and the people looking at this, and honestly, in my opinion too, it's that's not going to solve the affordability or the housing crisis because there is such a small number of actual institutional investors that own such a small percentage of the homes in the United States compared to the rest of the landscape. And the other thing that the article was saying was that a lot of development, like new home builds, they almost rely on these institutional investors to come in and buy. So if that goes away, then new home construction may decrease, which still doesn't solve the affordability and availability of homes. It actually makes it worse because if they choose to not build a whole complex because they were banking on 50% of it being bought by an institutional investor and making up that number of 50%, like they're like, well, not going to do that. Never mind. So I don't know. What do you think?
I think it makes a good headline, right?
Yeah.
Right, we're gonna ban all these big companies that are buying up all these properties. But when you actually look into it and you look at the data of what's been going on the last 10, 20 years, it's not a huge number, and it's not going to affect the housing market in a big way. It might affect it a little bit, and it might help affordability very little. But like if you're looking at the big picture and the average home buyer, you just mentioned the first time home buyer has moved from, I think it was like 34 or 35 a couple of years ago, all the way up to 40.
Mhm.
So you're talking to these people that are coming out of high school, and they go to college, they get their degree, and that looking for that American dream of home ownership. And you're looking at the numbers and you're like, all right, you're going to have to wait after you graduate college with your degree, another 20 years for you to see that reality. Now, obviously there's exceptions and things like that, but on average, yeah, that's scary. So, but to answer your question, we're going to talk about a few other headlines of it is a complicated situation, right? Affordability, there's so many things that are factoring in, and we're mentioning just the surface level. There's a bunch of other things. But me personally, I don't think that that's going to put a blip in anything going forward.
Yeah. I think it'll be like a lot of these headlines. Like there's like the initial like blip because of the sensationalized headlines and the markets react to the chaos from the headline. And then people are like, oh, yeah, okay, never mind. And then it goes right back to where it was. It normalizes. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah. So one other headline that I wanted to bring up, and I listened to a great podcast called On the Market with Dave Meyer, and they brought up this idea of portable mortgages, which allows a homeowner to transfer their existing mortgage, including the remaining interest rate, terms, and the principal, to a property when they move. It's common in Canada and the United Kingdom, but not currently a standard product in the United States. So they were bringing up some of the pros and the cons. Again, this is bringing up about affordability, right? If you refinance like Anna in 2021 and got that 2% or that 3%, and you're like, I do need to move, but really want to hold this property, right? I really want to hold, like, that's an asset right there, that 30-year fixed mortgage at 2.5% or 3%. So essentially what they're saying is you can bring that mortgage, the remaining balance, to your next property. Now, it sounds like a great idea, right? And what I was learning about it is how do you bridge that gap from, like, let's just say you're buying a $600,000 home, your existing mortgage is a $300,000 at that 2%, and you want to bring that to the next one. There's a $300,000 gap, right? How are you going to, unless you have that money, which, more power to you. A lot of people don't have that, right? So what does that mean? Do you get another second mortgage and you blend the two mortgages? It does get a little bit complicated, but this was a very interesting topic because, first of all, I didn't know it was a thing. I never even heard of it. Mm-hmm. And having that incentive for somebody that has that in that lock-in effect to actually move could help, essentially, but there is a lot of logistics that come along with it, right? And so wanted to bring this up. I wanted to see, one, have you heard of it? And two, what's your initial thoughts?
Yeah, I heard about it probably like you did, just through the news outlets and some of the real estate publications that we get as agents. And so, I mean, honestly, my first major reaction was like, what banks are going to be okay with this? Like, banks make their money off the interest rate. What bank is going to want you to keep carrying a 2.5% from house to house to house to house? So in my head, I'm like, man, all this bank lobby, all those lobbyists that banks pay to like go lobby the government are going to be like, no, we're good. We like the products that we have. That was my initial thought. I'm not a banker. I don't know. But that was kind of my thought, is because now, like, that's one of the big fears with people that do subject to, because they want a really good interest rate, is like, okay, is the bank going to do a sweep and decide to, call notes in because they don't want to lend money out at 2.5%. They'd rather get that money back and lend it out at 6% and make more money on it. So I thought that was interesting. And then, like he said, you brought up a great point. Like, if you carry that mortgage with you, the odds are there's going to be a delta, I guess, unless you're downsizing significantly into something smaller. I feel like most people in the United States don't downsize. They go the other way. So then you're going to have a delta of like what the loan amount is for versus like how much like you need to bring to the table to close the gap. And then I guess maybe lenders would make their money there because maybe they'd be willing to do second mortgages again like they did back in the day when everything, like all shit hit the fan, and charge like stupidly high interest rates to make up the difference. I guess maybe that would be an option, but
it even makes me think, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Like if you're buying a new home, maybe that new lender is going to be in first position and put that 2%, 3% in second position, which brings up a whole. And for those who don't know what positions, essentially, when you buy a mortgage, your first position lien is usually the mortgage company that you work with. And then you can get a second lien position, which are like HELOCs or HE loans, home equity line of credits. Whereas in this situation, we were just talking about that if you're getting a new loan for that, in my example, $300,000 delta, they want to be in first position. I'm pretty sure in case something happens to you and they have to foreclose, they want to make sure that their money's protected, because whoever's in first position essentially is first in line to get paid back in a default.
Correct. Unless they owe taxes, then you're effed.
That's first too.
Unless you owe debt. And unless you owe taxes, then Uncle Sam gets his cut first, and then first position can start collecting it.
That's right.
Oh, so
it gets a little tricky, right? There's a lot of technicalities. And like you said, the lobbyists, the banks who are making today 7-6%, they're going to be like, what? Why would I do this? Why would we do this?
Yes.
And yes, there's an incentive for more transactions if people are actually planning to move, but does that at the end of the day, what's in it for me? That's what all these bankers, they're going to look at the numbers and see if it makes sense. So
yes. And I just thought about this. I thought about this before, but it just came back to me. If you are somebody that wasn't able or didn't buy when rates were 2 and 2.5%, what about you? Like what is this going to do for you? Like, this isn't going to do anything for you.
Yes.
Like, or if you're like coming up and you're finally old enough to buy a house for yourself, these portable loans are going to help a subset of people that were lucky enough to get a mortgage at that rate that they can kind of keep carrying with them if they so chose. And I know the logic is like, oh, well, maybe they'll finally move and they'll free up a house for someone else, but that someone else is going to have to pay that like 6 or 7%. So they still can't afford it.
It's such a good point. Yeah, the first-time home buyers will not really be benefited with this at all, other than maybe more properties coming to the market. But yeah, it would essentially help all the people that have been sitting on properties at that interest rate, maybe the baby boomers that are like, okay, what are we going to do with this property? And yeah, so great point.
Yeah. We're not all baby boomers, by the way. I'm not a baby boomer.
I didn't say you were a baby boomer. I was talking about all the others.
All the other older people. I'm one of the young ones.
My parents, I was talking about them. But Anna, I know you had one more headline. You want to share that? Share that with us.
This is another new one, and I'm reading it directly. There was a third one, but I'll leave that one alone because I'd have to go find it. But this one just came out. This isn't like this week. I don't know. It's like spaghetti week. So it's like, let's see what happened. So again, President Trump, that guy, he basically directed Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac to go ahead and buy $200 billion in mortgage-backed securities. He's like, go forth, do that, because I'm not a lender, so I'm not going to go into the details of how that all works because I can't explain it very well. But essentially, that is his initiative to try to drive interest rates down because we're flooding the market with like all this, like they're basically buying, when Fannie and Freddie do that, they basically are buying loans back from banks and giving them an influx of cash that then they can then use and like lend back out. And the hope is that that'll drive interest rates down. And I think like today I heard like the interest rates did dip down a little bit because of this news, but this is another one of those situations like, what is it going to do? So I won't go into my like soapbox moment yet. I will stop there and I will let you jump in. And like, what do you think? Like hearing that, like, what did that make you? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I didn't read this article particular.
I put you on the spot.
It's all good. But yeah, buying these, is it a REIT or what are they buying? You said mortgage-backed
They're buying
securities?
mortgage-backed securities. Yeah, so it's basically like stocks that are backed by mortgages. Like when the banks package up the mortgages and stuff and like sell them off in chunks, then he's having Fannie and Freddie basically buy a bunch of these mortgage-backed securities to basically put money back in the market and hopefully drive like interest rates down.
I think that's just going to increase inflation, right? You're artificially moving money back and forth through these entities that isn't really, it's not really going to affect it. Yes, you're putting money back out there, but that money, it's not really real money, essentially, in my opinion. So I, I feel like this episode is down there. We're talking about things that aren't really, it's a complicated situation, obviously, but like
but it's meant to inform people, like, because everybody's reading these headlines and like I said, when you read like the blip and like the sensationalized headline, people are like, oh my God, does this mean it's coming? Like I saw one lender is like, yeah, it's finally working. Rates are down. And I'm like, okay, I want to hear what this guy has to say like a week from now, because I'm like, it is like an artificial thing. I feel like it does what every other one of these things we talked about does, where maybe it'll push it down for a certain point, but then you end up with the increase of costs because buyers will start flooding the markets again. Like it's not a sustainable model, and eventually we'll end up putting us right back where we were. Like right, wrong, or indifferent, as much as people hate to hear it, like inflation and higher interest rates, like the higher interest rates are there to try to bring down the inflation. And the inflation has not come down as much as people would have liked, or it has slowed down some, but it hasn't really come down. So like as much as people want things to be cheaper, we need to go through this wave so we can stabilize before we, as a country, will shoot ourselves in the foot and end up back where we were. And I guess as I was skimming through this article again and you were talking, the other thing that popped into my head is I thought we were in a deficit. I thought we owe like trillions of dollars to I don't know who. So I want to know how Fannie and Freddie, like, where's the money coming from for them to spend $200 billion in buying these mortgage-backed securities? Because these are like government entities, I should say. How does that work? I don't know.
You want to see something scary, you go on to, what is it, World?
The tracker?
Yeah, U.S. Treasury Deficit .org, or I forget what it's called, but it's pretty alarming how much trillions our country owes throughout the year. So yes, you bring up a good point. Where's this money coming from? Tariffs, things like that. That's a whole nother topic for sure. But
yeah, they're supposed to bring prices down too. That's a different headline. We could go into so many headlines right now that like.
Well, maybe we'll make this like a semi-monthly, like every other month kind of thing, because if you're the average person and you go on scrolling on Instagram, or you're going on the news or looking at the news, and there's so many headlines, right? And most of the time they're there to scare you, or they're bringing up these topics that Anna and I just brought up. And are those really going to positively affect the housing market, the housing crisis, the affordability challenges? Well, then you have to do a deep dive for yourself, listening to podcasts, reading some books. I love looking at Housing Wire Daily because they're all about the economy and things like that. So really try to educate yourself to come up with an opinion for what you think could work.
I agree. And I mean, we're being, or at least I know I am being funny and kind of having my little snarky remarks about it. It is not intended to be political, but it is just, these headlines are there for like the flashbang, like, wow, this is going to solve the crisis. But then like when you dig in, if you take the time to actually like look into it, which most people either don't know how, don't have the time to do it. And so I guess we're here to like provide kind of that insight of like from an investor perspective, from an agent perspective, like maybe good things will come of these things momentarily. I'm happy to go back and like look at these like headlines in 6 months and see if anything ever really came out of them, and eat my words if something really does. But just based on historic data on how economics works, on how our financial system, our government financial system is supposed to work, like that's kind of where our opinions are coming from, even though I admit I may sound a little quirky.
So with that being said, we'll conclude, but I want to leave you some space. What is advice you would give like the average buyer, or somebody's looking in 2026? They're like, hey, it could be two advice. One, looking for somebody looking to buy their first home, and two, for the investor that's like, hey, things slowed a little in 2025. What can I expect in 2026 for the investor? So what would you say for those two?
For the first time home buyers, like the ones I have now, I'm honestly telling them to start looking like right now. It's at least in our market, it's still early. We're not in the spring market quite just yet. And I think if because people have just acclimated. They're kind of getting used to it. I think people are just sick, like think you said earlier, sitting on the sideline. I think it's going to be a busy market this year, which is going to limit buyers' negotiating power if it truly gets busy. So I've been telling buyers, if you have the ability, and you have to make sure you have the ability to do it, if it's not the right time, don't do it. But I would say buying sooner rather than later, before like the busy markets hit. Like right now is a great time to buy. It'd be interesting to see what happens later in the year. I say go for it. If you can do it now, I'm telling my buyers, like, we should do it now. Don't wait till like March, April, May, because then that's when it really gets crazy around here with like government and military movements and things like that. For investors, I still think chaos breeds opportunity. There's still properties out there that are overpriced and sitting on the market for extended periods of time. And there may be some opportunity out there. There may be a chance for you to go in and negotiate something that you might not have been able to negotiate, especially if they haven't had any other offers. It's going to be interesting because, I mean, I've seen it. I had the couple I took out. We went to go see a property. The sellers clearly had issues in the past because I looked at the property history, and there may have been some pre-foreclosure issues in the recent past. And they're dead set on this one price. They will not come down. So it's been sitting for a very long time. Comps still support it. And it doesn't make sense at the price that it's at. But this person, like, as a seller, I feel bad because it doesn't seem like he can come off that price because he may end up underwater. He's one of those that just bought it a couple of years ago. So it's going to be interesting because I feel like and you didn't ask me about sellers, but I'm saying for the sellers, if you just recently bought a house, you really need to do some soul searching and talk to an expert to see what your options are as far as selling it, if you've got any equity in it, because as much as you may want to sell it, it may not be the right time unless you're just like, F it, I'm willing to put money down to get out of this place because it's that bad. So I think there's opportunities all around. I think it's good. I think right now, though, the opportunities for investors and for some potential buyers that are ready to like actually move and like make a move, I think now's a good time. I think there's opportunities.
Yeah, buyers have a lot more pull, and real estate is seasonality, right? So we're in the winter time right now recording this. And like you said, some sellers are stuck in the past and they want X for their home and it's sitting a little bit longer. So you as a buyer, you work with an agent that has a little experience and like, okay, it's been sitting on the market. Maybe we can ask for some seller credits. Maybe we can get a home inspection, and you have more pull. And then that's for all buyers, but specifically for first-time home buyers, I would say, obviously look into your first-time home buyer grants and see if there's things that can help you with your down payment. That's where you'll lean on your lender professional.
Lender.
Yeah, local lenders. Yeah, exactly. Local lenders.
I think banks don't know about those things. Like if you go to a good Chase or Navy Federal, right, or Indifferent, they're great. But most of them, if you call the 800 number, they don't have the bandwidth to know all the local programs in every jurisdiction that they serve.
100%. You bring up a good point. So yeah, definitely talk to your local lender. And then second is be flexible. We talk about this all the time about being flexible, whether you have your laundry list of things that you want in a home, but be open to if it has a unfinished basement. Okay. That's not a big deal. And maybe you can do some work and have it yourself. Maybe it has everything that you need, but it doesn't have a fenced in backyard. Okay. Well, maybe you can fence it in yourself. Be open to maybe house hacking. If you're younger and you're single and looking to buy your first home, be open to things like that you could get into homeownership, because that can snowball into your next property. And I love helping people buy their first property and think of it with a different lens, because that can really jumpstart your career as a buyer and then eventually maybe even an investor yourself.
I concur 100%.
But that's going to do it for our refresh and recap and projection episode of the Agents and Investor podcast. So Anna and I are coming up on 2 years. We're so excited. And thank you for everybody who's commented, liked, shared, subscribed. Please reach out to both of us, man. We love hearing your guys' questions and your feedback. And I want to give another shout out to all our awesome guests. I think one of our best parts of being in a few different communities, Anna, is everybody that we get to connect with and learn from. I think everybody who's come on has a really cool story and little things, one or two things that I pick up every time I'm interviewing these individuals. So huge shout out to all of them. We're going to have some really good guests coming up, by the way. I know Anna and I just booked a few. So make sure you guys stay tuned. Please like, share, subscribe. You can reach out to me and Garcia Official on all social platforms, and you can reach out to Anna at.
I'm Anna_realtor on Instagram, Anna Every Wealth. At some point, I'm gonna be like Nico and just make it one handle across the, like, maybe I should be Anna Official, but I don't know. And I was gonna say, if they're listening, I do want to hear their opinion. Like, if they agree with us or they don't agree with us, like, just don't be an asshole. Just, you can disagree
DM us.
and do it nicely. Like, I'm curious to hear what other people are thinking about the market. Are they excited? Have they seen the changes that they were expecting? Are they like ready to go? Are they hesitant for some reason? Like, I would love to hear that too, because then we know why people are listening. And two, maybe something we're saying is resonating with someone. And, we learn from other people too. So comment, let us know what you think.
And if there's any other new headlines that you see in the news in the next couple of months, I'm sure there will be. DM it to us and we can have it on the show and we can talk about it.
Amen. Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Anna, thank you guys.
All right. Bye.